My wife cheated on me with her boss, and now she's claiming I'm hiding $300, $0 in assets to cheat her out of our inheritance. Our whole divorce is turning into a legal nightmare over the house we bought with a $450, $0 mortgage, and I just found out she's been secretly selling property behind my back. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. It all started when I noticed little things. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it, but then the signs piled up so fast I couldn't ignore them anymore. My wife, Lisa, had been acting strange for months, more distant, secretive, and downright bitchy on some days. She'd snap at me over nothing, avoid my gaze, and always had an excuse ready when I caught her sneaking her phone into the bathroom or locking it when I was around. I brushed it off, convinced she was just stressed about work or something, but deep down I knew something was off. Then came the biggest shock. One evening I decided to check our bank account out of curiosity. Nothing unusual at first, just the regular bills, mortgage payments, and a few online shopping charges. But then I noticed a strange withdrawal, nearly $50, $0 from our joint account, made from a property management company I'd never heard of. I thought maybe it was some kind of investment, but I couldn't find any record of it. I called the bank, and they told me the money was transferred to a private account under a different name. That was suspicious enough, but what really threw me for a loop was the fact that Lisa was the only one with access to that account. I started digging around. My wife, Lisa, has always been good at hiding her tracks. She's manipulative and knows how to spin a story. I remember her telling me she was working late that night, but I caught her in a lie when I found a hotel receipt in her purse from 2 nights before. She claimed she was meeting a client, but the receipt was for a romantic bed and breakfast, not a business trip. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My gut was telling me she was cheating, but I needed proof. One day, I decided to follow her. It was risky, but I needed answers. I followed her to a fancy downtown hotel where I caught her sneaking into a room with her boss, Michael, a guy I knew she worked with but never trusted. She was giggling, acting overly intimate, and I saw her kiss him goodbye before slipping into the hotel alone. My stomach clenched so hard I thought I'd throw up. That was the moment I knew for sure she was cheating. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. How could she do this to me? After everything we built, she was out screwing her boss and lying to my face. I didn't confront her right then. Instead, I went home, my mind racing. I kept replaying that scene over and over, trying to process how Lisa, the woman I loved, was capable of this. I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. The trust I had in her shattered into 1,000 pieces. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs. Was I blind? Did I just ignore the clues because I didn't want to face the truth? The emotional pain was overwhelming. I'd always thought we had a solid marriage, but now I saw it was built on lies. The betrayal hit me harder than I expected, and I realized that this wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about the complete erosion of my trust, my future, the life I thought I knew. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started planning my next move. I needed proof, but more than that, I needed to understand just how deep her lies went. I had a sinking feeling that her cheating was just the tip of the iceberg. I remembered her bragging about the inheritance we were supposed to get. Our house, the property she claimed was all in her name, and how she kept accusing me of hiding assets. Little did I know, she'd been secretly selling property behind my back, trying to drain our joint assets, and I was just discovering the tip of her manipulative iceberg. It was clear she was trying to cheat me out of what's legally ours, and that realization made my blood boil even more. I started digging into our finances, pulling every document I could find. That's when I found out about the property she'd been secretly selling. It was a nightmare. She'd been transferring ownership of our second house, our rental property, to some shady buyers. I felt sick. How could she do this? What was her plan? Was she planning to leave me completely broke? That's when I realized that this wasn't just about infidelity, but a full-blown attempt to cheat me out of our inheritance, and I was the last to know. In the meantime, Lisa kept lying, denying everything. She spun stories about how I was paranoid, jealous, and accusing her without cause. She claimed I was hiding assets, trying to cheat her out of her rightful share of the inheritance. She said I was just a selfish man who didn't want her to have anything, but I knew better. I had the evidence now. The financial transactions, the secret property sales, the hotel receipts. I was furious, but I also felt numb. My entire world was crumbling, and I didn't know if I could trust her anymore or if I should just cut my losses and walk away. I realized I had to get ahead of her. I couldn't let her ruin me financially or emotionally. I started talking to a lawyer, an aggressive one who specialized in asset protection and divorce cases. I knew she was planning something, but I wasn't going to let her cheat me out of what's ours. I also decided I'd gather all the proof I could, screenshots, bank statements, everything. I was determined to fight back. I'd been naive and trusting for too long, but now I saw her for what she really was, a manipulative, cheating bitch who would do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying everything we had. This was just the beginning. I knew the fight was about to get a lot uglier, but I was ready. I wasn't going down without a fight. I'd expose her lies, her betrayals, and her greed, and when I did, she'd regret ever crossing me. After I gathered enough evidence, I started to realize just how deep Lisa's game went. It wasn't just the affair with her boss, Michael. She'd been actively manipulating our finances for months, maybe even longer. The secret sale of the rental property was just the tip of the iceberg. I found out she'd been siphoning money from the joint accounts, funneling it into her own secret accounts, and even transferring assets out of our name without telling me. Every new discovery felt like a punch in the gut, but I knew I had to keep my cool and plan my next move carefully. I started talking to my lawyer, Mark, who was relentless and sharp. I told him everything I knew, and he immediately saw the pattern. Mark explained that Lisa was trying to cheat her way out of her fair share of our assets, especially the house we bought with a $450, $0 mortgage. She kept insisting I was hiding $300, $0 in assets to cheat her out of inheritance, but I knew differently. I was stunned when I found out she'd been secretly selling property behind my back, just to line her pockets. She'd hidden her greed behind all this poor me act, claiming I was the one with secrets. Mark advised me to start documenting everything: bank statements, property deeds, emails, texts. I did just that. I also hired a private investigator because I wanted to catch her in the act if she tried to pull anything again. The more I learned, the angrier I got. I kept replaying her lies, her sneaky behavior, and the way she always played the victim when confronted. It was clear she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage, but I refused to let her get away with it. I was determined to fight her legally, and I wanted her to pay for her betrayal. One night, I decided to confront her directly. I caught her in the act of selling another property, this time a plot of land we owned together. She was caught red-handed, trying to transfer ownership to a shady buyer. I was furious. I told her she was done playing her games. She denied everything at first, spinning some bullshit about how I was paranoid, that I was just jealous, and accusing her of things she didn't do. She looked me straight in the eyes and lied through her teeth. But I had the proof, and I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of this one. That confrontation was intense. Lisa's face turned red with rage and guilt. She tried to gaslight me, saying I was overreacting, that I was just jealous of her success at work, and that I was trying to ruin her. She threw accusations back at me, claiming I was hiding assets, that I was the real cheat. But I stayed calm and told her I'd call the police if she didn't stop her illegal activities. I knew I had her cornered because I had all the proof. I also told her I was planning to divorce her and fight for every penny of our assets. Her face twisted in anger, and she stormed out of the room, yelling about how I was ruining everything, that I'd regret this. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had concrete proof, and dread because I knew Lisa wouldn't go down without a fight. I started to realize that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my future, my dignity, and the betrayal of everything I thought we had. I kept thinking about how she had lied, cheated, and manipulated her way through our marriage, all while pretending to be the innocent victim. I was furious at myself for trusting her so blindly, but I also knew I had to stay strong. I had to prepare for the legal battle ahead, and I had to be ready for whatever she threw at me next. In the days that followed, Lisa doubled down on her lies. She claimed I was trying to ruin her reputation, that I was the real cheater, and that I was just trying to hide assets to keep her from inheriting what was rightfully hers. She even went as far as to accuse me of having an affair, just to shift the focus away from her own betrayal. I knew she was desperate, but I also knew I couldn't let her continue. I filed for divorce, and that's when things really started to spiral out of control. She hired her own lawyer, and suddenly, what was supposed to be a straightforward separation turned into a full-blown legal nightmare. The most shocking part was discovering her plan to claim that I was hiding assets to cheat her out of her inheritance. She was trying to spin the story that I was the bad guy, that I'd been secretly stashing away millions while she was just trying to get her fair share. But I had the evidence to prove otherwise. I knew she was trying to manipulate the court, and I was ready for the fight. I had the bank statements, property deeds, and witness testimonies. I also had recordings of her threatening to destroy me if I ever found out what she was really up to. Throughout all this chaos, I couldn't help but feel a mix of disgust and heartbreak. I loved her once, believed in us, but now I saw her for what she truly was. A selfish, manipulative woman who'd do anything to get what she wanted, even if it meant destroying me in the process. The betrayal cut deep, but I also learned an important lesson. Trust is fragile, and sometimes you don't find out the truth until it's almost too late. I promised myself I'd fight for what's mine, and that I'd never let her get away with this. I'm still in the thick of it, but I know I'll come out stronger on the other side. I thought I had a good handle on the situation after filing for divorce and gathering all my evidence. I had the bank statements, the property deeds, the recordings, everything I needed to prove Lisa's lies and manipulations. But then, out of nowhere, she pulled a new stunt that made everything escalate even further. I was just starting to breathe a little easier, thinking I'd finally get justice, when I discovered she'd been secretly selling property behind my back, trying to drain our assets completely. That's when I realized this wasn't just a messy divorce. She was actively trying to bankrupt me. It started with a tip from a friend who knew I was going after her in court. He mentioned a suspicious transfer of ownership on a small commercial property we owned. I looked into it, and sure enough, Lisa had transferred the title to her sister without telling me. I felt like I'd been punched again. How many properties had she sold? How much money had she already taken? I immediately called my lawyer, Mark, who told me this was a serious offense, fraud, theft, and possibly even criminal conspiracy. I couldn't believe she was so reckless, so willing to destroy everything we'd built. I decided to hire a private investigator, Tom, who specialized in real estate fraud. I needed to know exactly what she'd done and where the money was going. Over the next few days, Tom uncovered a trail of shady transactions. Lisa had been transferring ownership of our properties to shell companies and shady buyers, some of whom I'd never heard of. She'd been secretly selling off our assets, probably to fund her lifestyle or to hide her assets from the court. Every revelation made me angrier. I'd trusted her, and she'd been plotting behind my back to wipe us out financially. The worst part was realizing she'd been planning this for months. She'd hidden bank accounts, transferred properties, and even taken out loans against our assets, things I never knew about. When I confronted her with the evidence, she looked me in the eye and lied again, claiming she had no idea what I was talking about. She said I was paranoid, that I was just jealous and trying to frame her. But I had the proof, and I was starting to see her for what she really was, a manipulative liar who would do anything to get her way, even if it meant destroying me and our future. I sat her down and laid out everything I had found. I told her I knew about her secret sales, her transfers, and her attempts to hide assets. I warned her that if she didn't come clean, I'd take everything to court and expose her lies. Her face twisted with rage and guilt. She tried to deny everything, saying I was just trying to ruin her, that I was jealous of her success and her relationship with Michael. But I didn't buy it anymore. I knew her game now, and I was ready to fight back hard. The next day, I filed a motion with the court to freeze all her assets, including the properties she'd been trying to sell. I also demanded full disclosure of all her financial transactions. I knew she'd try to hide even more, but I was prepared. I contacted a forensic accountant to dig through her accounts and uncover any hidden money. I had to make sure she couldn't drain everything before the court could step in. I was furious. This woman had lied, cheated, and schemed her way into destroying what we had. I was no longer just fighting for the house or the inheritance. I was fighting for my future, my reputation, and my dignity. Throughout this process, Lisa kept up her act of innocence, claiming she was the victim of my accusations. She said I was trying to ruin her, that I was jealous of her success, and that I was just trying to hide assets to cheat her out of her inheritance. She called my lawyer, Mark, a bully and accused him of trying to ruin her life, but I knew better. I had the evidence and I knew she was lying through her teeth. Every time she spun her stories, I felt more determined to see this through and make sure she paid for what she'd done. Meanwhile, her lies started to unravel even more. The court hearings revealed her attempts to hide and sell assets, and I could see the frustration and desperation in her eyes. She was trying everything to manipulate the system and cling to what little she had left, but I refused to back down. I was done being the naive husband who trusted blindly. I realized that she was capable of anything, cheating, lying, even trying to bankrupt me. I was scared, angry, and hurt, but I also knew I had to stay strong. This wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. In the middle of all this chaos, she accused me of being the real cheat, claiming I'd been secretly hiding assets, that I was the one trying to cheat her out of her inheritance. She said I was the manipulative one, the liar, and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. I just looked at her and shook my head. I had all the proof. I knew her game now, and I was determined to see it through. I told her flat out that I was going to expose everything in court, that she'd be held accountable for her lies and her illegal activities. The look in her eyes was pure hatred, but I didn't care. I'd fought too hard, come too far to let her destroy me now. This was only the beginning of what I knew would be the ugliest fight of my life. But I was ready. I had the evidence, the legal team, and the resolve to make sure she paid for her betrayal. It's one thing to cheat on someone, another to try to wipe them out financially and emotionally. I don't know how this will end, but I do know I won't go down without a fight, and I'll make damn sure she regrets ever crossing me. I thought I was finally gaining some ground, but of course, Lisa had one more trick up her sleeve. Just when I believed I had her cornered with all the evidence of her property sales, hidden accounts, and ongoing financial manipulations, she suddenly went dark. No calls, no texts, no emails, nothing. It was like she disappeared off the face of the earth for a few days. I figured she was just trying to regroup, but then I found out what she'd been doing behind my back. She'd been secretly hiring a team of lawyers, and more alarmingly, she'd started to make moves to sell off even more assets, stuff I didn't know about. The real shock came when I tracked the transfer of ownership of our primary residence. She'd been trying to sell it, even though it was still mortgaged and legally ours. I couldn't believe it. She was about to cash out on the house we bought together, using it to pay off her legal bills and maybe even leave me with nothing. I called my lawyer immediately, and Mark confirmed that her actions were not only illegal, but also a blatant attempt to cheat me out of the inheritance we were supposed to share. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I knew I had to act fast. I filed an emergency court motion to stop the sale and freeze all her assets. I also ordered a court-ordered audit of all our accounts and property transactions. Lisa's lawyer, a sharp-tongued woman named Diane, responded with a barrage of lies and accusations, claiming I was trying to hide assets and that I was the one cheating her all along. The court hearings became more heated as Lisa's team tried to spin her as the victim, but I had the evidence to counter every lie. During this chaos, I hired a forensic accountant, Sarah, who dug into every financial detail. She uncovered a pattern of Lisa transferring money into offshore accounts, some of which I didn't even know existed. It was clear she'd been planning to disappear with as much as she could get her hands on. The more I learned, the more I realized how deeply she'd betrayed me, not just with Michael, but financially as well. The betrayal felt like a punch to the stomach every time I uncovered another lie. One night I sat alone in the house, staring at the piles of documents, realizing how much damage she'd done. I felt sick, exhausted, and furious. I had loved her, trusted her, and now I saw her for what she truly was, a manipulative, deceitful woman who'd do anything to get her way. The image of her sneaking out to meet Michael, lying about work, selling assets behind my back, it all played in my mind on repeat. I wondered how I'd ever trusted her, how I'd been so blind to her lies. But at the same time, I knew I couldn't let her get away with this. Not anymore. The court date was set, and I prepared myself for the worst. I had everything ready: proof of her illegal property transfers, bank statements, witness testimonies, and the testimony of the investigator. I was determined to fight for what was ours, even if it meant a long, ugly battle. I also realized I needed to protect myself emotionally. I'd been through so much heartbreak and betrayal already, and I knew I'd have to stay strong for whatever was coming next. Lisa's behavior only got more erratic. She started accusing me of all sorts of things, claiming I was trying to ruin her reputation and that I was the real cheat. She even went as far as to threaten me, saying she'd destroy me financially if I kept pushing. That was the moment I knew she was desperate, losing control. I didn't flinch. I told her I had everything documented and that I'd see her in court. I warned her that if she didn't stop her illegal activities, I'd get a judge involved and make sure she paid for her lies. Meanwhile, her legal team kept trying to spin stories about how she was the victim, how I was the one hiding assets, and how I was trying to cheat her out of her rightful inheritance. I couldn't believe the audacity. I had the proof, and I was ready to expose her lies to the court. I realized that this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about her trying to wipe me out and walk away with everything, just because she wanted to play the victim. I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I finally had the upper hand, but dread because I knew Lisa was capable of anything. I'd seen her lie, cheat, and scheme to the bitter end. I knew she'd try to manipulate the court, spin stories, and maybe even try to turn the judge against me. But I was prepared. I had everything lined up: witnesses, expert reports, and a clear timeline. I was determined to fight for my rights and make sure she didn't get away with her deception. All the while, I kept asking myself how I'd let it get this far, how I'd been so blind to her true nature. It's painful to admit, but I learned the hard way that trust can be a dangerous thing. Sometimes, you think you know someone, only to find out they've been plotting behind your back all along. I don't know how this will end, but I do know I won't give up. I'll do everything in my power to protect what's mine and hold her accountable for her lies, her schemes, and her betrayal. I never expected my life to turn into such a legal nightmare, but I'm ready to see it through. The court date finally arrived after what felt like an eternity of sleepless nights, endless paperwork, and mounting anxiety. I sat in that courtroom, papers stacked high and heart pounding, knowing this was the moment everything would be decided. Lisa looked calm on the surface, but I could see the flicker of desperation behind her eyes. She knew her entire house of cards was about to collapse. Her lawyer, Diane, tried to spin her story again, claiming I was the one hiding assets, that I was the real manipulator trying to cheat her out of her inheritance. But I had all the proof. Every bank statement, every property deed, every sneaky transfer she'd made. When it was my turn to speak, I laid out everything. I presented the court with the forged property deeds, the bank transactions showing her siphoning money into offshore accounts, and the investigators' reports on her secret sales. I detailed her attempts to sell our primary residence and other assets behind my back. I explained how she'd been trying to drain us dry, all while maintaining her innocent facade. I could feel the courtroom hanging on every word, and I saw her lawyer's face tighten as the evidence piled up against her. Lisa's face turned white when I finished. She tried to argue, claiming I was the one hiding assets and that I'd been unfaithful and manipulative all along. She threw in some wild accusations, saying I'd been having an affair, that I'd been secretly planning to leave her with nothing. But I just looked at her and shook my head. I knew her game and I'd caught her red-handed. I told the judge that her actions were illegal, fraudulent, and a clear breach of our marriage vows. I asked for full disclosure of all her assets in order to freeze her accounts and to stop any illegal property transfers. The judge listened carefully, then made a ruling that surprised even me. He ordered an immediate freeze on all her assets, including the properties she'd been trying to sell, and mandated a full forensic audit of her financials. He also granted me temporary sole control over the house until the final decision was made. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders, but I knew this was just the beginning of a long fight. Lisa's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, and I could see the war wasn't over yet. In the following weeks, the court proceedings turned uglier. Lisa's team tried to discredit me at every turn, claiming I was trying to hide my own assets and that I was the real cheat in this game. But I had the evidence, and I had the law on my side. The forensic accountant, Sarah, uncovered even more disturbing details. Lisa had transferred hundreds of thousands into offshore accounts, hidden assets in shell companies, and even forged signatures on documents. Every new fact made her look more guilty, and I could see her frustration growing. Meanwhile, Lisa was losing her grip. She started lashing out, making wild accusations and trying to turn friends and family against me. She claimed I was abusive, that I'd been cheating on her, and that I was only after her money. I was disgusted. It was so typical of her to lie and manipulate, but I refused to be pulled into her games. I knew the truth, and I knew I had to stay focused. I kept pushing forward, determined to expose her fully and reclaim what was rightfully mine. One night, I got a call from my lawyer. Deanne was trying to negotiate a settlement. She offered a fraction of what I was asking, trying to buy her way out of trouble. I refused. I told her I wanted full restitution, the house, and everything she'd stolen. I was done playing nice. I was tired of her lies, her schemes, and her betrayal. I'd come too far to back down now. As the legal battle dragged on, I started to feel a strange mix of hope and exhaustion. I knew Lisa wasn't giving up easily. She'd fight tooth and nail to keep what she thought she deserved, no matter how dirty her tactics. But I also knew I had the truth, and I had the law on my side. I kept telling myself that eventually justice would prevail. I'd see her exposed for what she truly was, and I'd get back the life I'd lost. Looking back, I realize how much I've learned from all this, about trust, deception, and the importance of protecting yourself. I never thought my marriage would turn into a legal nightmare, but I'm proud of how far I've come. I've become more cautious, more aware of the signs of manipulation, and more determined to stand my ground. If there's one thing I want to share with others going through similar hell, it's this: never underestimate a person's capacity for betrayal. And always keep your eyes open, because sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who can hurt you the most, but you have to fight for yourself, no matter how ugly it gets. The final hearing was a whirlwind. After months of legal battles, mounting evidence, and Lisa's desperate attempts to manipulate the court, the judge finally reached a verdict that felt like a victory. But it came at a cost I never imagined I'd have to pay. The judge ordered her to relinquish control of all the properties she'd been trying to sell, including the house we'd bought together. He also mandated a full division of assets, making her pay back every dollar she'd secretly siphoned off, plus damages for her illegal property transfers. The court didn't just see her as a wronged wife anymore. They saw her as a scheming manipulator trying to cheat her way out of her responsibilities. When I heard the ruling, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washed over me. I finally felt like I could breathe again, knowing she couldn't keep up her lies or continue to drain our joint assets. But the emotional toll was heavy. I'd been betrayed in the worst way, and even with justice served, the scars remained. I realized I'd been living in a fog of denial, trusting her blindly for so long. Now I saw clearly. Lisa had been a master of deception, hiding her greed behind a facade of victimhood and charm. The woman I once loved was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. The aftermath was a strange mix of closure and reflection. I moved out of the house, leaving behind the memories of happier times I now knew had been built on lies. I sold off what little was left of her assets that she hadn't managed to hide or sell, and I started rebuilding my life from scratch. It wasn't easy. Trust was shattered, and I had to learn how to be alone again, how to trust my instincts, and how to recognize the warning signs I'd ignored for years. I cut ties with most of her friends and family who had been complicit or too afraid to speak out. It was a lonely process, but I knew it was necessary. Looking back, I can see how this nightmare changed me. I became more cautious, more alert, and even more determined to protect myself and my future. The betrayal taught me a hard lesson about trust and greed, but it also made me stronger. I found new purpose in rebuilding what I'd lost: my confidence, my stability, and my sense of self. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you can turn out to be the biggest enemies, and that you have to fight tooth and nail to reclaim what's rightfully yours. As I write this, I want anyone reading to know that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way out. Justice isn't always swift, and it doesn't always come easy, but if you stay vigilant, gather your evidence, and never give up, you can come out on the other side. I've learned that betrayal doesn't define you; how you handle it does. And I choose to move forward stronger than ever, knowing I fought for what was mine and that I'm finally free from her web of lies. That's all I can ask for now.